In the heart of Oakland, California, a small bakery's warm light spills onto the dark sidewalk at 4:30 a.m. Inside, the aroma of fresh bread mingles with coffee as Anthony, a 62-year-old baker, kneads dough with hands that have been practicing this art for over 4 decades. He pauses briefly, watching through the window as another winter morning unfolds on the street where his grandparents first opened this bakery in 1956. But this morning is different. Like many small businesses in the area, Anthony's bakery has been struggling since the pandemic. Yet something remarkable has been happening in this neighborhood, something that would soon challenge every preconception about community, unity, and the true meaning of looking out for one another. 2 blocks away, Sarah, a high school teacher, is already awake. She's not preparing lesson plans, though. Instead, she's coordinating with a group of local volunteers who have been quietly transforming their neighborhood over the past few months. What started as a simple food drive has evolved into something far more powerful, a movement that transcends racial barriers and economic divisions. The streets that were once marked by invisible lines of separation are now witnessing daily acts of kindness that defy stereotypes. Senior citizens receiving groceries from teenage volunteers, children getting free tutoring in the community center, local businesses supporting each other through hard times. But it's not just about giving. It's about understanding, connecting, and recognizing the humanity in each person, regardless of their background. As dawn approaches, more stories begin to unfold. There's the retired postal worker who turned his garage into a free computer lab for kids needing internet access for remote learning. The group of nurses who volunteer at the free health clinic after their regular shifts. The local artists who transformed boarded-up storefronts into murals celebrating unity and resilience. But perhaps the most compelling story is yet to be told. It centers around a controversial development project threatening to displace several longtime residents and small business owners. The community's response to this challenge would test their newfound unity and reveal whether their bonds of empathy could withstand real pressure. Anthony wipes flour from his hands and steps outside to bring in the morning paper. He notices a group of young people gathering across the street, their breath visible in the cold morning air. They're carrying signs, but these aren't protest signs. They're something else entirely, something that would soon catch the attention of media outlets across the country. As the sun rises over Oakland, casting long shadows across the awakening city, this community stands at a crossroads. Their story isn't just about one neighborhood's journey toward unity. It's about challenging the narratives that too often divide us. It's about proving that empathy isn't just a feel-good word. It's a force powerful enough to transform communities. The aroma of fresh bread continues to fill Anthony's bakery as he prepares for another day. But today, like every day recently, feels different. There's a tension in the air, a sense that something big is about to happen. As more people begin to appear on the street, each carrying their own stories of struggle and hope, one question hangs in the morning air. Can this community's experiment in radical empathy survive what's coming next? The answer lies in the events that would unfold over the next 24 hours, events that would test their resolve, challenge their unity, and ultimately reveal the true power of a community united by compassion. But that's just the beginning of this story. As the morning sun climbs higher, the group across from Anthony's bakery grows larger. Their signs begin to catch the attention of passersby. Community over profit. Save our heritage. Unity is our strength. But what makes these protesters different is the diversity of faces among them. Elderly residents standing shoulder to shoulder with college students, business owners alongside factory workers, all united by a common cause. The development project threatening their neighborhood isn't just another real estate deal. The proposed luxury apartment complex would replace a block of historic buildings, including the community center that has become a lifeline for many local families. It's where children receive after-school tutoring, where seniors gather for meals and companionship, and where the neighborhood's weekly unity meetings have been taking place. Sarah, the high school teacher, arrives at the gathering with a stack of papers. They're not just petitions. They're detailed proposals for an alternative development plan, one that would preserve the community's character while still allowing for growth. The document represents countless hours of collaboration between local architects, small business owners, and residents. But will anyone in power actually listen? Inside his bakery, Anthony continues his morning routine, but his mind is elsewhere. He remembers the day 30 years ago when this neighborhood helped his family rebuild after a devastating fire. Back then, no one asked about race or background. They just showed up with tools, supplies, and willing hands. That spirit of unity had faded over the years, but recent events have rekindled it in unexpected ways. The crowd outside has swelled to over 100 people when the first news vans arrive. Local media has caught wind of something unusual happening in this Oakland neighborhood. It's not just the protest, it's the story behind it. How a community chose to respond to adversity not with anger or division, but with unprecedented cooperation and kindness. Down the street, the free health clinic is opening its doors. Today's volunteer staff includes Dr. Chen, who runs a successful private practice across town, but dedicates every Tuesday to serving uninsured patients here. Beside her, retired nurse Mrs. Thompson prepares the intake forms, continuing her 40-year tradition of community service. They're both aware that if the development project goes through, this clinic space will be among the first to go. But something unexpected is about to happen. A sleek black car pulls up to the protest site. Through its tinted windows, everyone can see the unmistakable silhouette of Richard Wilson, the development project's lead investor. He steps out, not with security guards or lawyers, but alone, holding what appears to be an old photograph. The crowd falls silent as Wilson approaches the community center steps. The photo in his hands shows this same street from 1975, and in it, a young boy is receiving a free lunch from a community program that once operated here. That boy, now wearing an expensive suit and carrying decades of success, is Wilson himself. As he begins to speak, more cars arrive. City council members, other investors, media outlets from neighboring cities. The story unfolding here is bigger than just one neighborhood's fight for survival. It's about to become a test case for how communities across America might face similar challenges. But just as Wilson is about to reveal his true intentions, something happens that no one could have predicted. A discovery in the community center's basement, made just moments ago, threatens to change everything. This revelation could either save the neighborhood or tear apart the very unity they've worked so hard to build. The discovery in the community center's basement sends ripples through the gathered crowd. While cleaning out old files, volunteers found a collection of yellowed documents dating back to 1923. These weren't just any papers. They were the original deed to the land and architectural plans, revealing something extraordinary about the building's history. Richard Wilson stands transfixed, his expression unreadable as Sarah carefully lays out the documents on a folding table outside the community center. The papers reveal that the building was originally established as one of the first integrated community spaces in Oakland, funded by a coalition of local families who pooled their resources during a time when such cooperation was almost unheard of. But there's more. Hidden within the architectural plans is evidence that the building contains historical significance that could qualify it for protected status. The basement itself, with its peculiar layout and reinforced walls, once served as a safe haven for families escaping violence during times of civil unrest. The very foundations of this building tell a story of unity and protection that spans generations. Anthony steps out of his bakery, carrying fresh bread for the growing crowd. As he distributes the warm loaves, he shares stories passed down from his grandparents about the building's role in bringing the community together during the hardest times. Each story adds another layer to the building's significance, making it increasingly clear that this isn't just about preserving brick and mortar. It's about protecting a living piece of history. The city council members huddle together, speaking in hushed tones. The media cameras roll as community members step forward one by one, sharing their own connections to the space. A retired teacher reveals how the community center helped her establish the first integrated after-school program in the district. A local artist describes how the building's walls hosted the neighborhood's first multicultural art exhibition in the 1960s. Tension builds as Wilson's phone keeps ringing, likely his investors and lawyers calling about the situation. But he lets it ring, his eyes fixed on an old mural partially visible through the community center's windows. The painting, faded but still powerful, depicts people of all backgrounds working together to build something greater than themselves. Suddenly, a group of construction workers arrives at the scene. They're the same crew scheduled to begin demolition next week, but something about their presence today feels different. Their leader, a weathered man in his 50s, steps forward with another set of documents in his hands. The crowd holds its breath, wondering if these papers could undo everything they've discovered. Sarah's hands shake as she accepts the documents from the construction foreman. As she begins to read, her eyes widen. The papers seem to contain information that could either save their beloved community center or seal its fate forever. The crowd leans in, waiting for her to share what she's learned. But before she can speak, a loud crack echoes through the air. Everyone turns toward the sound. It came from inside the community center. The old building, as if aware of its moment in history, seems to be speaking. Another crack, and then another. The structural engineer in the crowd rushes toward the entrance, his face grave with concern. Whatever he's about to discover could change everything, not just for this building, but for the entire movement that has grown around it. Wilson steps forward, his expression shifting from concern to something else entirely. He reaches for his phone, not to answer it this time, but to make a call. The future of the neighborhood hangs in the balance as he raises the phone to his ear, and everyone waits to hear what he'll say next. Wilson's call isn't to his lawyers or investors. It's to his grandmother. On speakerphone, her voice trembles as she reveals a truth that stuns the crowd into silence. Back in 1963, she was one of the volunteers who helped establish the free clinic in this very building. Her words paint a picture of a time when healthcare access was even more limited than today, especially for marginalized communities. The community center, she explains, wasn't just a gathering place. It was a lifeline. As she speaks, the structural engineer emerges from the building with unexpected news. The cracks they heard weren't signs of decay or damage. Behind one of the cracked walls, they'd discovered a hidden room, perfectly preserved for decades. Inside, shelves lined the walls, filled with meticulously maintained records documenting every act of community service, every life touched, every bridge built between different groups in the neighborhood. But just as this discovery seems to strengthen their cause, police vehicles appear at both ends of the street. A city official steps forward, wielding a new set of documents. These papers suggest that the recent zoning changes might override any historical preservation claims, regardless of the building's significance. The community's heart sinks as they realize they're facing not just a business decision, but a legal battle that could set precedents for neighborhoods across the country. Sarah, however, notices something odd about the zoning documents. Her years of teaching critical reading come into play as she spots discrepancies in the dates and signatures. She whispers her findings to Anthony, who immediately begins making calls to longtime business owners in the area. Within minutes, a pattern begins to emerge, one that suggests the zoning changes might not have followed proper procedures. The construction workers who've been quietly observing suddenly become active participants in the unfolding drama. Their foreman reveals that similar development projects in other neighborhoods have led to unexpected consequences, not just displacement, but the erosion of community bonds that took generations to build. His crew, he announces, is refusing to proceed with the demolition until the full truth comes to light. Meanwhile, inside the hidden room, volunteers are discovering more than just records. Photographs, letters, and journals tell stories of how this community came together during national crisis, natural disasters, and social upheaval. Each artifact adds weight to their cause, but also raises the stakes of what they stand to lose. Wilson, still on the phone with his grandmother, walks slowly through the crowd toward the community center's entrance. His face shows the conflict of a man caught between his business interests and his personal history. But before he can reach the door, another discovery stops him in his tracks. Among the recently found documents is a contract signed by his own grandfather, a binding agreement that could change everything. The city council members are now huddled around their phones, clearly stunned by what they're hearing from their legal advisors. The media crews, sensing an even bigger story developing, begin broadcasting live. Social media explodes with support from other communities facing similar battles across the country. Just then, a group of students from the local high school arrives with their own revelation. Through their research project on urban development, they've uncovered a series of connections between the proposed luxury development and several controversial projects in other cities. Their evidence suggests a pattern that goes far beyond this single neighborhood. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the gathered crowd, tension builds to an almost unbearable level. Wilson stands at the center of it all, holding his grandfather's contract in one hand and his phone in the other. The choice he's about to make will affect not just this community, but could set a precedent for similar battles across the nation. But before he can speak, another voice rings out from the back of the crowd, someone whose presence nobody expected, carrying information that could turn this entire situation on its head. Through the crowd walks Mrs. Rivera, the 91-year-old former city planner who served Oakland for over 4 decades. In her weathered hands, she holds a leather portfolio that catches Wilson's attention immediately. She explains that she's been following this story from her retirement home, recognizing patterns she had seen throughout her career. But what she reveals next leaves everyone speechless. The portfolio contains detailed urban planning documents from 1975, the same year Wilson's childhood photo was taken. These papers outline a visionary community-centered development plan that was meant to be implemented across Oakland, with this neighborhood serving as the pilot project. The plan, created by Wilson's grandfather in collaboration with local leaders, was designed to prove that progress and preservation could work hand in hand. As Mrs. Rivera speaks, Wilson's grandmother, still on speakerphone, begins to cry. She reveals that Wilson's grandfather never got to implement his plan because he passed away suddenly that year. The luxury development project Wilson had been pushing would have literally paved over his grandfather's unrealized dream for the community. The construction foreman steps forward again, this time with a solution. His crew doesn't just demolish buildings, they also specialize in historical renovation. He unfolds architectural plans showing how the community center could be reinforced and expanded while preserving its historical elements. The cost would be significantly less than the proposed luxury development, and the building's capacity to serve the community would actually increase. Sarah and her students quickly crunched the numbers, demonstrating how their alternative development plan could generate sustainable revenue through a combination of community programs, small business incubation, and cultural events. The city council members, seeing the potential for a groundbreaking model of community-centered development, begin nodding in agreement. Wilson finally makes his decision, but it's not what anyone expected. Instead of simply withdrawing the luxury development plan, he proposes a partnership. His investment company would fund the renovation and expansion of the community center, following his grandfather's original vision, while the community would maintain control over its operations and programming. The profits would be shared, creating a sustainable model that could be replicated in other neighborhoods. But just as victory seems certain, the unexpected twist arrives. Another developer reveals they've already purchased several surrounding properties. Their plans would effectively isolate the community center, potentially undermining its ability to serve the neighborhood. The crowd's celebration turns to concern, until Anthony steps forward with a surprising announcement. It turns out that the recipes that made his bakery famous weren't just his family's recipes. They were contributions from generations of neighborhood families, each adding their own special touch over the years. He proposes turning the entire block into a cooperative marketplace, combining the renovated community center with spaces for local businesses, creating an economic ecosystem that could stand against any future development pressure. The City Council, moved by the community's unity and innovation, fast-tracks approval for this new vision. Wilson, inspired by his grandfather's legacy, pledges additional support to help other neighborhoods develop similar models. The media captures the moment as residents of all ages and backgrounds come together to sign the new community cooperation agreement. As the sun sets on this historic day, Mrs. Rivera shares one final detail from her portfolio, a letter written by Wilson's grandfather decades ago. In it, he predicted that someday his grandchild would face a choice between profit and community, and expressed his faith that the right decision would be made. The letter ends with a quote that would become the community's new motto: "True progress isn't just about building higher, it's about building together." The crowd disperses slowly, but not before making plans for tomorrow. There's work to be done, a new future to build. Anthony heads back to his bakery to prepare for another dawn, knowing that every loaf of bread he bakes now carries an even deeper meaning. The story of this community's triumph would inspire others across the nation, proving that when people stand together, preserve their history, and embrace positive change, anything is possible. 1 year later, the transformed neighborhood stands as a testament to what can happen when a community refuses to be divided. The renovated community center, now named Unity Hall, has become a model study by urban planners and community organizers from across the country. Its walls, freshly painted but still bearing the historic murals, tell both old and new stories of cooperation and resilience. Anthony's Bakery has expanded into a teaching kitchen within the cooperative marketplace, where neighbors share family recipes and cooking techniques passed down through generations. The aroma of fresh bread still greets early morning visitors, but now it mingles with the sense of dishes from around the world as local cooks prepare for another busy day of serving their specialties. Sarah's students have turned their research project into a permanent exhibition in Unity Hall's main corridor. Their documentation of the community's struggle and triumph has become required viewing for visiting city officials and developers. The display ends with a growing collection of photographs showing other neighborhoods implementing similar cooperative development models. Mrs. Rivera, now 92, holds a weekly storytelling session in the community center's new garden. Children sit on recycled wooden benches, listening to tales of the neighborhood's history while their parents tend to the shared vegetable plots. The construction workers who refuse to demolish the building have become regular visitors, often volunteering their skills to help maintain and improve the space. Wilson, transformed by the experience, has established a foundation dedicated to supporting community-centered development projects. His grandmother, now a regular at community events, loves to point out how his grandfather's vision finally came to life, though in ways no one could have predicted. The hidden room they discovered has been preserved as a museum, its documents and artifacts carefully cataloged by volunteer archivists. The free health clinic has expanded its services, now operating from a larger space within the renovated building. Dr. Chen and Mrs. Thompson have trained a new generation of volunteer healthcare workers, ensuring their legacy of compassionate care continues. The clinic's waiting room walls feature photographs of the day the community came together to save their neighborhood, reminding everyone of what's possible when people unite for a common cause. But perhaps the most remarkable change isn't in the buildings or programs. It's in the way people relate to each other. The invisible lines that once divided the neighborhood have disappeared. Residents who never spoke before now greet each other by name. Children play freely across what used to be territorial boundaries. The weekly Unity meetings have evolved into community celebrations, where stories, food, and traditions are shared openly and joyfully. The cooperative marketplace has created dozens of new small businesses, owned and operated by local residents. Every shop tells a story of determination and community support. The marketplace has become so successful that neighboring areas are beginning to adopt similar models, creating a network of community-centered economic zones across the city. As Anthony locks up his bakery one evening, he pauses to watch the sunset paint the sky above Unity Hall. The building stands proud, its renovated facade illuminated by the warm light. Through the windows, he can see another community meeting in progress, residents of all ages and backgrounds working together to plan their next project. The scene reminds him of something Mrs. Rivera said during one of her storytelling sessions. A community is like a loaf of bread. It needs all its ingredients to rise together. The story of this Oakland neighborhood has become more than just a tale of preservation or development. It's a blueprint for how communities can face change without losing their soul, how progress can honor history, and how ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they stand together. As night falls and the lights of Unity Hall continue to glow, they illuminate not just a building, but a promise that when we choose to see the humanity in each other, there's no limit to what we can build together.